You know, it's pretty funny. When I thought about making this video, I wasn't sure if it was proper of me to say that the Assassin's Creed movie failed. In my eyes, the movie was pretty good. I mean, I enjoyed it. I felt like it was graded a bit harshly by critics, but to be fair, movie critics haven't always been the most logical as of late. Still, if we want to consider the facts, the Assassin's Creed movie was not by any means a massive success. Despite being so great to an Assassin's Creed fan, I think the fundamental reason behind its flop wasn't just the movie itself, but also its inability to give non-fans an understanding of what was going on half the time. And let's face it, when you release a movie to a mainstream audience, it's a bit of a tough sell to explain the entirety of Assassin's Creed lore to someone that's never touched the game before. Video game to movie adaptations are hard, and there's no denying that. Video games are often living, breathing projects that can change, update, and adjust over time. The issue with movies is that they have both affordances and constraints. In the case of film, the constraints of production, timing, and technology obviously come into play. Movies are not living, breathing projects. They are filmed, edited, wrapped up, and released in the state that they are in. There is no way to give hot fixes or patches or updates. The best you can do is just remake the entire film. And while that's not really fixing it, that's just completely starting from scratch. So with that being said, video games also have genuinely intensive amounts of lore poured into them. With the rise of modern gaming technology and our computing power today, game designers have pretty much made it a mission of theirs to ensure that video games have a story behind them. Even if that story doesn't feel necessary, or fans don't particularly care, the story can play a role in the player experience. It provides more life to the game and more character to the world. And because video games can adapt within their release, it's highly plausible that video game stories will become vast alongside such changes. Additionally, because video games often receive plenty of sequels if they succeed, the chances to grow that lore are much more intensive and important. Player experience relies heavily on the ability to interact with the game, and stories are part of that interaction experience complex. They give the player something to identify the game with. Assassin's Creed is a story-based video game series developed and published by Ubisoft. It's well known historically that Assassin's Creed got its start in 2007 at Ubisoft Montreal with the release of the first game. That first title would go on to spawn a now 15-year-old franchise, with the next title, Assassin's Creed Mirage, coming out in 2023. Due to the nature of Assassin's Creed, the story is vast. Because of this, adapting it into a movie is not a simple feat. Should the filmmaker choose to tell the story of Desmond and Altair from the first game, you risk running into simply repeating the story from the game and not having anything unique to differentiate your film line. Then, if you decide to create your own unique story, you're constrained by budgets and time restrictions. Movies usually max out at a little over 3 hours. Otherwise, most people would just stop watching. We are humans and can only engage with a piece of media for so long, so a movie with too much explaining and not enough action will pan out too long and will be boring. The issue with Assassin's Creed over a franchise like Call of Duty, for instance, is that Assassin's Creed's core lies in its lore and story. Call of Duty could quite literally create a story set in any time period with any new cast of characters in a random war, and you couldn't really tell the difference. Call of Duty World War II is unrelated to Call of Duty Black Ops 2. You don't need to know one to know the other. That's pretty much the problem with adapting Assassin's Creed into a movie though. You can't just pick one up and expect to understand everything. You'll still be confused and either have to play the other games or read about it. That is, assuming that you care that much to know. But for a movie, I think it's a problem to not know what's going on. When the Assassin's Creed movie came out in 2016, it presented us with a new story with an assassin that lived in the time of the Spanish Inquisition. It's actually a great time period to explore, with plenty of opportunities to see parkour, action, and real assassin adventures in such a cool location in the world, and such an engaging piece of history. From the outside, it seems like a great premise. Still, the issue didn't just come down to the premise or the film's contents. I mean, it had action, adventure, violence, character development, the whole package. We got to see assassin action in Spain, we got an interesting modern day perspective, we got hidden blades. But the thing is, you probably liked it if you already liked Assassin's Creed. Meanwhile, let's just take someone who knows nothing about Assassin's Creed. They'll probably just be lost. When you try to adapt something into another medium, you have to be careful to think about how you'll execute the adaptation to ensure everyone knows what's going on. It feels like the director simply didn't know how to make an Assassin's Creed movie that everyone would understand without glossing over things. But still, a lot of people didn't understand. The stunts were great in the film, with the stuntman for the assassin literally performing a 125-foot leap of faith, which is amazing. But still, even with impressive stunts in action, people will still look for some level of substance to the story. If I were someone completely unaware of Assassin's Creed prior to watching the film, I'd probably just be downright confused about why the Templars are villains, why the assassins fight them, why are there assassins in Andalusia in the first place, why are the Templars working with the Inquisition, what does the Inquisition have to do with assassins, and so on and so forth. The thing is, you can afford to explain all of this in a game. You can pan a game out for over 100 hours if you wanted to, and it would be fine. You don't need to make a game wrap up with all details inserted before the 3-hour mark. The thing is though, you can make video game adaptations that many people can enjoy. Take a look at Netflix's Arcane, which is based off of League of Legends. I've never so much as even thought to touch League of Legends, but I watched the show and was able to connect with it and immerse myself with it, because the story was told in a way that made sense. I didn't care to look into the game behind it, and the writers ensured the show was reasonably making sense for people like me. The vast majority of its viewers likely never even touched League of Legends either, so that's important. Sure, it was a TV show, so there's more time, but I think you get my point. Beyond this, I think it also comes down to the content of the film itself, because you see, enjoy the action all you like, characters and plot are important in a cinematic context. Throughout the Assassin's Creed games, we get plenty of character development and time to grow and learn with the other characters. In a video game, it's pretty easy to ensure that you have proper character development. Video game main stories can last as long as the designer wants them to be, of course within a budget constraint either way, but you still have plenty of time to ensure that your characters are good and make sense. Now, whether or not that's the case in every game is obviously up for debate. Still, with a shorter project like a movie, you have to effectively make a good character that changes so that they're dynamic and interesting enough for the viewer to feel connected to. Callum, the main character, just wasn't really that interesting. I wanted to see more of Aguilar and the assassins in Andalusia, but they didn't really get much character development either. The one-dimensionality and lack of real dynamic change made the characters empty. Their dialogue is also pretty lacking. The script felt half-finished and written at the last second. I'm not a scriptwriter, I'm a novelist. I mostly write military sci-fi. Speaking of which, check out my series The Fallen Age Saga. Book 1 is available on Amazon and Book 2 is on its way. Link in the description. Back to the topic. When I write my novels, one of the core parts is character development. The same goes for scripts, I mean it's still a story. Boil down a story to basic elements. If your character sucks, your story's a failure pretty much. Looking beyond the character, action, choreography, and stunts are important. Like I mentioned earlier, this movie did have some pretty cool stunts and decent action. However, when you play the Assassin's Creed games, they're intense and they've got some really cool action. It's one of the things that makes them rewarding to play. The movie could have really done more. Callum could have been a much more interesting protagonist like Desmond. Instead, I felt like he was lacking in so many areas. I didn't really care about Callum and his story much, even though he had a really interesting setup as a person. Plus, it's a video game adaptation. I mean, let's face it, they're typically infamous for getting a lot of things wrong or changing things from the video game for some reason, even though they don't need to be changed. I mean, the Animus isn't that hard to recreate in a movie. It's like an advanced VR table. I mean, I think it was because they didn't want it to seem like The Matrix and they wanted to do something unique, but I mean, it's still inaccurate. And the bleeding effect was inaccurate too. In the games, the bleeding effect simply just kind of referred to the process in which the ancient ancestors' experience started effectively bleeding into your vision in the modern day, and that came with more time spent in the Animus. Instead, in the movie, Callum fought his reflection as a result of the bleeding effect. I've played like pretty much every single Assassin's Creed game. I can recall this happening a total of never. The modern day story could have been so much better and it could have been given more attention, but the movie was fighting between making an interesting ancestor sequence and an interesting modern day story without giving the proper level of attention to either. I did like the scene when Callum could see many of his ancestors. I believe we got a glimpse of Arno in the mix. I thought that was a really cool scene. It definitely was a good addition to the movie. However, once again, this movie fails dramatically at appealing to non-fans, which is definitely its biggest issue. I watched the movie with my mom a few years ago, and because I've explained the entirety of the Assassin's Creed lore to her, she knew what was going on. We could enjoy the action and all that because we didn't need to think about the story. I can imagine that anybody who doesn't know the entire story would be downright confused. You could make the rebuttal that, well, why would a non-fan watch a movie about Assassin's Creed if they're not a fan of Assassin's Creed? I'll counter that rebuttal with this. It's a story at the end of the day too. If you've never watched like Gen 1 Transformers TV shows, does that mean that you can't enjoy the Michael Bay movies? No, that's not what that means. The Michael Bay movies, as much as they were crazy, still explained what the backstory was enough to help non-Transformers fans understand what was going on. So pile on a bland set of characters, wasted opportunities to make a better story, decent but lackluster action, and no explanations for non-fans, you've got the recipe for the failure of the Assassin's Creed movie. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed that video, subscribe with notifications turned on so you never miss out on another upload. Leave a like and comment down below your thoughts on the Assassin's Creed movie. Check out my newspaper for gaming news and more. The link to that is in the description, along with the link to my military sci-fi fantasy books. Thanks again, Symbiosis out.